So I have switched to continue to seed save and grow her variety that she seed saved to keep the ancestral story alive, because those seeds tell a story. They have a memory of the gardener's hand, your wind, your soil. So I'm keeping that going.
You're listening to How I Grow This, exploring stories of gardeners from across the globe as we learn from their biggest tips and tricks to some of the things not to do. I'm your host, Luke Hammond. All right, I think we're recording. It said something went wrong, but all the time, we're in this wrestling ship of technical issues, right? Which seems like what growing is. Half the time, you're just facing technical issues gardening. You're listening to the How I Grow This podcast. I'm your host, Luke Hammond, and today's guest is Shawnee Grows. She's very active in the seed time community, and I actually reached out to her in one of the chats in the live webinars. I sent an email to her behind the scenes and said, hey, I would love to have you on the episode or have an episode with you. And she has a YouTube channel. So, Shawnee, welcome to the podcast.
I am here for the conversation, of course, with all the gardeners around the world, always.
Awesome. Glad you're here for it. Tell me a little bit about what started this gardening passion of yours. Like, what really just started it?
I did not grow my own garden until I started having kids. So that was about 8 years ago. It was that chemical change that a lot of women talk about, where all of a sudden you go, I am growing food now. It started with containers. We went with buckets and anything that was free on the side of the road, graduated into putting a raised bed style up with a couple of boards, fenced it off with the wrong type of fencing, put the hot crops, the warm loving crops in a shaded area, learned the failures of that, discovered how to chase the sun, put in a rock border bed with strawberries and tulips, and started discovering if you plant a sunflower, it self-sows itself. Every year it'll come back and you'll be able to see it. So I've really grown with my children in the garden at the same time here.
Okay, so the past 8 years, you say you experienced this chemical change in your brain. You're like, I've got to start a garden. Did you just go to the hardware store and just start with your shopping cart, dumping seeds into the cart? Or what did that look for you? What did that look like?
I did go the easier route. When you're a beginner gardener, you buy things already started that make sense, and then you direct sow the things. I can't say where I am in Minnesota, but I am in zone 5A, and that kind of tells you in the spectrum of where I'm at. We have a wonderful seed co-op here where you can get pounds of seeds at a really decent price. So I hit up local nurseries for plants and I went and got seeds from them. And then I was able to I did buy a potting soil or a raised bed mix. And then I slowly started to learn how to build healthy soil and the soil food web and everything. And then, you learn by planting it in the wrong place and planting it in the right place and comparing it. And you go, okay, that's where that should grow.
Gotcha. So you already had enough of a connection to know, hey, I'm going to go to the local nursery. I'm going to buy these plant starts. I have the itch. I got to start growing food, but I'm actually going to start here. Walk me through, I guess, some of the early years of gardening. New with kids, and you were just planting everywhere. You said 5-gallon buckets and jugs. And when did you come to a point where you're like, okay, I'm going to create some sort of structure behind all of this? Was that right away, or was that kind of a longer journey?
I would say in year 2, I was completely addicted. We've all talked about our brain on gardening and what actually happens inside of you and your body, and that chase for the ripe fruit, that chase, that hunt for the harvest, the satisfaction of hands in the soil. I think that observing the area of where I was growing a garden here where I still currently live. It's a rental property in the middle of town. So there's a lot of challenges with that. There's neighborhood bunny rabbits. We started growing a garden in the front yard, and the neighbor kids were coming and helping themselves to that. So we had to establish boundaries. I got completely sucked into watching things on YouTube. And so then you look at, you're using a cattle panel for a trellis to grow pole beans on. I'm going to do that over a walkway in my front yard. It was so much experimenting with. Every single year we added a space until I maxed out this space, which now I currently am not growing any food here right now, actually, in this property.
Okay, let's go there. So you maximized everything, and now you said, nope, we're not going to grow anything. Or what's going on? What's the plan?
Okay. We thought we were going to be moved out of here. It's like I said, it's a rental property. I have
Hmm.
3 children under the age of 7. We're outgrowing this space, and it's about time we get some ownership of land, right? That hasn't happened yet. I am still here. But I couldn't live with I'm not going to have a garden. So I went back to, okay, how many buckets is our max? How many can I fill a trailer with 35 plants and call it good? And I still have my garden that can travel with me, because when you move or buy a property, you don't know when it's going to be. And gardening season here, it's 150 days of frost free. And then of course your shoulder seasons of cold tolerant plants. Then we had to have construction done on this rental property where you rip out the entire dirt around the foundation all the way down 8 feet and retile it and waterproof it. So anything that I had growing, all my perennials, were going to get ran over by machinery. So luckily, but sadly, a property owner had the ability to reach out to me because I know them personally. And technically, it's where I grew up gardening. I was a little girl harvesting peas, uh, trimming the green beans for blanching. That garden no longer had a gardener because of a life-changing situation. So now I had a place to dump perennials and to start gardening. So I do travel 15 minutes to go to this garden property, and we have an agreement on where I can grow, what I can't grow, what I can film and not film for the YouTube channel. And it's been working out really good.
That's fantastic. Go into a little bit about what was going on with the digging around the house 8 feet down. Was it some sort of soil reclamation thing, or was it for the structure of the house? What was going on there?
Basement water issues. If you're in
There you
Minnesota,
go.
you know what this is. The house is old. Landlord was told by the city, we need to remedy this. So that's what happened if you've ever been a part of basement waterproofing.
So, being from Arizona, there's been things like that where it's a soil reclamation where they actually, from old mine tailings, come through and they cut the entire soil out of the lot, down to 18 inches or even more, and they remove that to like some sort of, waste place or
Yeah,
something.
wherever they
And
can process it.
then they bring in some fresh, topsoil for the entire space. So I was curious if it was that or, basement. All right. Minnesota, far north. Let's talk climate. Let's talk. You have this 150 days. You're complemented by a little bit of longer, a light period during that time. So the growing season is fast and furious. Let's talk about when um, your last frost, because we're in spring recording this. When are you hoping is going to be your last frost this season?
So we've had a lot of changes over the years, I've noticed. If you've been following the USDA growing zones, we kind of switched from a 4B to a 5A. But I'm telling you, when I shop perennials, I shop down a zone, I'm still looking at 4s or even 3s. So last frost date can be May 3rd to May 18th. We have had a foot of snow drop in May and total out one of my vehicles before. So we'll see what happens this year. I'm always watching soil temps. It's very important to take the temperature of the soil, not just air temperature, because then you know when you can put your cool crops in and your warm crops in.
Exactly. So talk to me a little bit about, as the USDA growing zones are changing, and as a lot of gardeners that we've talked to feel like things have both been warming up, but the extremes have gotten bigger, the swings and the types of storms they're facing. Um, I think even Michigan had a tornado like yesterday or this weekend,
Yes, in
from this. So
March.
yeah,
Yeah.
in March. So things are shifting. What does that shift look like for you as you're planning out your garden this year? And do you try to roll the dice a little bit and push seasons, or do you kind of play it a little bit more reserved?
Yeah, there's a lot of pieces to this, and it's really changed my gardening story over the years. So when you look at growing in town that's wind blocked and has a lot of things that cause the earth to heat up faster, my microclimate, I was planting in April here. with the cool crops. Now, moving out to the garden property out in the country where it's windy and wild and things are cold and frozen under feet of snow most years, I can't get in the soil till towards the end of May. I am not using frost cloth in any of my growing. I don't have greenhouses or hoop houses or tunnels. I am utilizing winter sowing by using a container like an old wash bin with drainage and a glass panel for a window on top to warm it up because I am not a fan of milk jugs and vinegar bottles. I have talked about this on my channel. There's too many little things to keep track of. So we can see a high of 90s very quickly. So that really messes up all our spring crops. If we get one of those quick flips, we are able to see negative 40 Fahrenheit with the wind chill in the winter. Now that's fine if we have our blanket of snow. It was a couple years ago now. We didn't have any snow and we were still getting the cold and we were losing perennials because we didn't have that warm blanket. We had our snow this year. So it's really been up and down from switching where I'm growing at. And then the weather isn't as predictable on the calendar as it used to be.
On things like tomatoes and peppers that you're starting indoors.
Yeah.
Are you maintaining a very similar plant date? When are you sowing those in order to transplant out in May when you have such drastic variations? Are you potting up? Are you just choosing to let them get a little more, root bound? Do you try to cool them down to slow growth if you're still cold? Like, talk through some of that strategy.
Yeah, it's all about timing, isn't it? And with the whole zone changing thing, I did not adjust my seed starting calendar. I still went with what I know has worked in the past. So peppers, I just put the seeds in soil yesterday. I have an indoor growing station. Yes, huzzah. We got it done.
Yeah.
I've got one of those 10-20 trays with a 72 cell that I like to put everything in. And then once they have, 2 inches of growth, true leaves, they're looking strong and good. I do like to do that up pot process to maybe a 3-inch pot. I like bottom watering. I use a fan. I love my grow lights. I have tomatoes that I start in April. Now I am going to tell you, if you've been following the channel, I have a mystery tomato plant that I don't remember planting. When I was doing microgreens this winter, because we do grow in the winter inside, I had a tomato plant and it's 2 feet tall right now. So we're just kind of experimenting and letting that ride if I can get that to fruit before we even plant outside.
Very cool.
The hardening off process is really tricky and annoying when you have trays of 10-20 trays for, peppers and tomatoes. So waiting as long as possible because I'm not risking it. I'm at the point where I'm doing this to feed my family, not just a hobby. So I'm not going to risk losing everything just because I'm antsy and I want to put something out 2 weeks ahead of time. I'm waiting patiently, keeping everybody fed and happy for the plant structure.
Let's dive into that a little bit because I think that there's a lot of different gardener motivations, if you will. For me in the past, it's trying to rush to get to market for the sake of profit. The early tomato gets not the worm, but the dollar. The early tomato makes the big money in not only in peak interest in people's minds. For most of the places I grow, everybody wants that tomato in May and June, even though the real tomato season is July, August. And then for whatever reason, their desire for that tomato diminishes for most people, not everybody. There's some serious tomato people out there. Their desire for that tomato diminishes when the peak season is setting on. And so you said something very, very specific there. You said, I'm growing for my family. Let's walk through that and let's unpack what decisions that changes within how you're growing what you're growing, and then what you're growing.
Absolutely.
Let's talk food and family and the reasons you're doing what you're doing.
So that's also changed over the years, of course. We always talk about grow what you eat. And so different types of experimental pockets of your garden, there's like this spectrum of percentage. You're going to have this first as perennials. So I've got a whole list of perennials that I put in and I add some every year for my area. and it's going okay. It's one of those lazy gardener tricks.
Okay, let's talk about the perennials.
Sure.
Dive in. Talk about species. Talk about what you're doing. Talk about why. All that
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah, it's a bit of the way I started it was grocery row garden style. It's like little forest islands. I looked at the property and went, okay, we have an east spot and a west spot. I can see that the water starts in the east, flows down, flows over, exits on the west end. So I put a food forest at each spot. I have the multiple layers of things. So the East Island is strawberries, different types of raspberries. I'm on year 3 for asparagus, so it's the year of eating it. The Egyptian walking onions. I have 2 different types of Asian pears. I am trying contender peach, which I've been told in Minnesota you might have to just keep planting it every 5 years because it fizzes out. Blueberries, honeyberries, comfrey. If you don't have comfrey, you should get some. Our chives, our sage, our herbs. I also have elderberries because that is important for our health. And I think it's one of those easy things to grow. At least here it is. I took a mulberry and stuck it in the ground. We'll see if it produces anything. I have plums I'm trying to do. I'm trying to get away with nectarines and apricots. And I tried to pick areas where they might make it. I haven't had a harvest yet because I'm still new. That, like I said, this is year 3. So maybe we'll see some of these trees flower this year, but I am new to taking care of all these perennials.
And that is all on is this the garden that you're managing 15 minutes away, or is this
Yeah,
okay, that's the 15-minute away garden.
all of it's there.
Um, I was going to say if you're on rental property, don't risk perennials.
No.
If you hear this. And first of all, like, your relationship with your landlord has to be pretty special for gardening in general. Talk through that a moment if you can. Is it challenging to get permission to do some of the gardening things that you did when you're in that sort of context?
Have you ever heard of it's easier to ask for forgiveness than ask for permission? I didn't ask. I just did it. I slowly, we did the containers on the deck and I had some in the front yard. And I have a pretty easygoing landlord. And I have heard stories where it's not that, it doesn't end that way. Some people truly are told you can't grow here and they have to go the community garden route or find a buddy with property and put a garden there. So I didn't ask.
Gotcha. It does get challenging, and you've got to really consider those factors, because at any time when a contract ends, your growing space ends, right? And so if you are growing, make sure that the containers that you're choosing are mobile. Make sure that you're not damaging the site, even from the eyes of your every gardener's eyes are a little different, and they might think that this is just adding value, but really it's adding work for the next
Tenant.
for the owner, the next tenant, that is
Yeah.
is not helpful. So keeping into consideration those, I think,
I'm in
are
the process of planting grass seed right now, which hurts my heart.
mm, yeah.
Yeah.
So okay, we talked a little bit about all these perennials, these fruit trees that you've established, these alliums, these, asparagus. Um, when does asparagus start to pop in Minnesota?
May, June.
Okay,
Yeah.
so we have this. Your frost window is right at the end of May. You're probably coming out of your frost. You may have a last frost in May. When uh, can that push all the way into June where you're at, or is that very rare these days?
So my section of Minnesota does not see frost in June. There are parts of Minnesota that do, like the homesteading RD, I'm pretty sure sees frost in June.
Mhm. Yeah, I've talked with Katie, and she's the homesteading RD, and she does see frost into June depending on the year. And she also mentioned the dry year, where it was -40, dry, cold, and the damage that was done there. Um, let's talk about this 150-day frost-free window. That means that you're experiencing frost mid-September
Well,
most
let's
years?
see. October 4th is the earliest that we've
Okay,
recorded seeing frost, but
okay.
sometimes we can get away with it. I mean, we used to have snow on Halloween, and now that's fizzled out. So if that kind of gives you perspective on the change.
So the interesting thing that I'm seeing here, um, those dates are really only a couple weeks different than here in Missouri. They can vary, but with these big swings, it changes. Same thing with where I was at in Arizona, higher elevation. Um, Arizona with the nighttime temps and the daytime temps being so drastic. So we could very well experience frost into like very early in October, very hard frost. Um, or it just doesn't really have a hard frost until like November, like it was this year in Arizona, where I was at. So it's very big windows of missed opportunity if you choose not to roll the dice. Um, we were in the conversation about the food that you're selecting for your family. So now you have this large perennial load of food that hasn't really yielded out yet. Let's talk about the selection of stuff for producing food for your family on the annual side of things through this window. And are you trying to harvest enough to get you all the way through the harsh Minnesota winters?
Oh yeah.
Oh, yeah. All
Yeah.
right. Oh, let's get
Okay.
into it. This is going
So
to be great.
then that next, when we're talking about that spectrum of percentages of how you plan out your garden, after the perennials, we talk about the calories, right? And things that cure and store for the winter because we are in winter. I'm going to, 6 months out of the year. So that's when I go hard into your garlic, onions, winter storage squash, your potatoes. Now I do have local farms that help me get the amount of potatoes and onions that I need to feed my family because I can't grow the 300 pounds that it takes for us to get through winter. So outsourcing things is totally acceptable. You're still a gardener, right? The dried beans game has been life changing. I will always designate massive amounts of space because I can to growing dried beans. Then we're going into what are we preserving? The way I experience preserving is freezing. I have done water bath canning. I am new to fermentation since last year, game changer. So now I'm looking at growing things just for that. So I'm talking about carrots. You can do that with ginger and garlic, and your cucumbers into pickles, of course, is a tried and true one. I grow lots of tomatoes. I think I have 21 varieties this year, and I do grow them on the cattle panel trellis with T-posts like most people see for vertical growing. And I have put them in the food forest where they sprawl out on the ground and you still get a tomato. It just looks a little rough. I have to grow things that we can eat fresh, right? So we have all our different greens, which looks many different ways, your kale and your chard or your more hardy ones that can pull out through the year where lettuce, we always talk about this rhythm. And I might be going all over the place. I apologize, but I'm
No, you're
passionate
good.
about gardening. So like when we have that rhythm of succession sowing, there's this list of things we put in every 2 weeks. So you can succession sow a green bean for fresh eating, switch out different types of varieties of lettuce, whether they're cold tolerant or heat tolerant. You can go into radish if you're a radish lover. Don't come at me in the comments if you don't eat radish. I get you. I hear you, right? Your different types of beets. There's all kinds of experimental things in the garden. That's another category. So like, what do you want to grow that's new to you? Because you should always try new things because you never know until you grow it, right? I did a whole video on all the seeds I'm growing this year and a live stream on how I plan my garden. So if you want to check that out, head over to Shawnee Grows.
That sounds great. I want to talk a little bit about the calorie side of things and then specifically the calories of winter squashes. Because that was kind of the second thing on the list, and how you shift, kind of your thinking. Are you doing bulk planning of specific kinds of potatoes? Do you try to grow um, potatoes different than what's offered from your local farms, just for a little bit of variation? Um, let's talk calories and potatoes, and then going into winter squash.
Okay. So most of us have seen the potato sprout in your pantry and now you can grow it. That's a seed potato. So what I do is, like I said earlier, I have a local potato farm that we travel to and we buy hundreds of pounds from them in bags and some sprout. And that's just my potato supply. That's what I plant I do a planting. Sometimes I can do it in April, depending on what the future forecast looks. And then I can plant again in June and I can plant again in July. So then, like the first harvest, I'm fresh eating. Then those second two rounds that I planted, those are now my storage varieties for me to feel like I accomplished something. And then, of course, we go to the potato farm. So, no, I'm not really out there seeking specific types of varieties to buy a seed potato from a big box store or a retailer in that sense. I'm planting what I have because why spend the money when I've already spent the money on something? For the winter squash, it brings up an interesting concept that I really speak passionately about, and that's with saving seeds. So the gardener of this land was my mother. She is my mother. She's the one that had the life-changing situation, and now I'm the gardener of the land. So she had saved seeds from her squash every single year and kept them in the freezer. Now, it was your Waltham butternut variety, and those do get pretty big. Just like if you've seen a tromboncino, that is massive. A cushaw squash, that's massive. So if you have a squash loving family, plant massive sized ones. I have discovered I am the one that eats the squash. Not a whole lot of other people want to eat it. So for me to cut into that and then do now what with it? So I have switched to continue to seed save and grow her variety that she seed saved to keep the ancestral story alive, because those seeds tell a story. They have a memory of the gardener's hand, of your wind, your soil, all of that. So I'm keeping that going. I'm also introducing honey nut, butter bush. They are like hand size squash. So I'm just gonna harvest that and process that and eat it in a setting. Now, new this year is Thelma Sanders. Have you ever heard of that winter squash variety?
Sounds familiar. I'm not Mr. Winter Squash,
Oh, no? Okay. Yeah,
but
it's a shape of an acorn, and it's supposed to be like a sweet potato substitute because there's just too much struggle growing sweet potatoes here, because that's
yeah.
another calorie storage crop that is on the list if you were to write a list of like survival crops. But I can't get away with that without really focusing on that. And when you have over 3,700 square feet of growing space that you're trying to manage by yourself, I want things that you can set it and forget it and stay in their space. And then I can focus on um, the rhythm planting and the taking care of things. And if we're doing, a fertilizer session or anything, there's so many times where I have to split my decision on what am I going to do while I'm out there, because my garden is not in my backyard.
Mm. And that makes a big difference. So you have 3,000 square feet of garden in this particular plot that you're traveling 15 minutes to. How is that a traditional square shape? What and describe the 3,000 square feet. What does that translate to for people that may not be familiar?
Yeah, it's all over the place. So if you're looking at a bird's eye view of 2.5 acres, we've got from where the rainfall starts on the east side, I have a rain garden that's a 12 by 13. And then we flow down and we go into the East Food Forest Island, which is 11 by 34.
Okay, so describe
And
for people who may not be familiar with
oh,
these terms.
yeah,
What's a rain garden?
sure.
Does the rain just fall on that area and you somehow
No,
isolate? No.
it's,
Okay.
okay, technically I planted it incorrectly, just for the record. But what happens in a rain garden? You look at a low-lying space where rain kind of floods an area, and maybe you want to capture that water instead of running it away from your land. A rain garden is a set of plants that have a deep root system that absorb that and use it, and it helps bring in beneficial pollinators. It provides that diversity for soil life. What I did was mnlcorp.com rain garden kit. They sent me a box of plants, and then I planted them in this space. And now I'm starting to experiment with things like Mexican sunflower and growing more things for the birds, like a sorghum or a millet, possibly used for human consumption too. And it's just another space where I can put something when you have extra plants that maybe you didn't plan on seed starting that many, but all your seeds germinated, and now I have a place to shove them technically. So that's a rain garden. It has a
And so how
purpose.
big of a space is that, and how have you managed uh maybe the soil structure to retain that water in that area? Have you put some sort of swell for that water to pool, or is that just natural landscape untouched and that's just where it naturally goes?
Yeah, I didn't actually do any swales. I didn't dig any tunnels or trenches and put mounds in on any of what I'm talking about. It was the natural, it's all about watching the land. We go back to that conversation when you're a beginner gardener or you get a new piece of land, you watch where the sun and the shade lines are, you watch where water floods and flows, you watch where the snow drifts land, all that stuff. So I just knew naturally it puddles in this area and then goes throughout the property. So my intention was capture it, slow it down, and then put gardens along each part. And then I'm chasing the sun. Like I said, I've got gardens on the north end of the property, the middle of the property, the south end of the property. It's a walk. It's not easy to water, tell you that.
Okay. So you've got these garden spaces that are dispersed amongst a 3-acre space. Is that correct? Am I
Correct.
getting the image right?
Yep.
Now, what is managed? What is the space in between that's being managed? Is that lawn? Is that forest? Is
So we don't have forest. We do have windblock hedgerows of evergreens, Colorado blue spruce. And I can't say a lot of what's on the property because it is not my property, but it's grass mostly, yes. And then we're surrounded by tillable land, which is another avenue of frustration when growing a garden in the country. The tillable land, which is your normal corn and soybean rotation around here, but we're getting out of that, which I can talk a little bit about. That one is not organic. So being able to protect my gardens from aerial sprays or just regular driving a tractor and applicating things that maybe I think aren't good for my garden is frustrating. Across the road is the organic field where they've grown things like teff and they've grown all kinds of organic straw for the strawberry farm and they do cover cropping and it's beautiful. And I just wish everyone on this side would switch to that, just to go on a tangent. But
talk about the shift real quick since you opened up that can of worms that you're seeing a shift in your area of the crop rotation.
yeah, so instead of seeing corn and soy all the time, which they used to have alfalfa in between, I don't see that anymore. Now I'm seeing oats. We're getting an oat mill around my area of Minnesota. And so I'm super excited to watch that process of watching something else grow. When we seen the teff grow, they then did a cover crop where it was daikon radish, turnips, mustard greens, and collards, if I believe. I always poke around in the field. And then up the road, the organic, they did corn that was organic, and they had a water robot that did liquid feed instead of doing aerial or driving a tractor in there. The organic straw that grew for the strawberry farm, they put in peas and oats. And so now I started working with cover crops and I have a whole bunch of experiments with that hopefully this year while we're in the growing season. That has been really inspiring because we have a local seed resource for farmers that is diversity blends of cover crops. And we were trying to promote AEA with John Kempf in our area. And so hopefully we can switch to all the regenerative conversations of farming, which takes different equipment and a different mindset and a different budget.
Yeah. And usually it always actually the economy works out a little bit better,
To
surprisingly.
that,
Some of the AEA inputs may not feel like that initially, but the
I
output
know.
will feel that way.
Yeah.
Um, I I want you to continue to describe your garden. You've got this rain
Yes.
garden that you've planted all these intentional plants. Um, is that an organic shape? Is that square? Is that
It's a square.
just okay? So it is just a plot. And how are you arranging these plants? Are they in manageable rows? Are they kind of helter skelter? Do they have some sort of rhyme or reason? Walk me through that process.
Yeah. For the rain garden conversation, you're supposed to use the ones with the deepest tap root kind of towards the center of it and build your way out. I didn't do that. I went with, 4 corners, and then we fill in towards the center. It's a hodgepodge. That's what
And
that looks like.
how big of a space is that? Is that 20 by 20, 40 by 40,
The rain garden is 12 by 13.
12 by 13?
What happened was there was a deck there, and then the deck got taken to the dump, and it was this bare patch of earth. And I don't know how all you gardeners out there feel, but I was like, ooh, I'm putting stuff here. We're not
Yeah,
planting grass here.
opportunity. Very
Yeah.
cool. Okay, and then you have another garden that is where the land kind of flows and works its way down. And you said something else was going on there. What garden is that space?
So next stop would be the East Food Forest Island, which is pretty full. And I do try to mix annuals in with my food forest because, again, I'm in that baby stage of the perennials aren't producing a whole lot right now. That's where my garlic is right now. And so early morning sun, shade in the afternoon, it always has water, that kind of thing. When we turn and go west, the strawberry patch that has been there for 30 years, and I don't know how to manage it, is right there. It's 14 by 20. And then we come into the original annual garden, which
Okay.
is 600 square feet. That is shaded, which I didn't realize the first year of planting. By the way, made that mistake again. Put warm loving crops in a shaded area. They didn't grow very well. Now, the beautiful thing after that is probably one of my favorite pieces. It is my butterfly memorial garden. And so that is 14 by 14 square. And we took what we deemed butterfly plants because, we always hear about milkweed, but we wanted something different. And we've been experimenting with that, but it also is a memorial piece. Okay. So this is where we represent our ancestors in our garden. I have planted gladiolas for my great grandmother. My mother's different plants that she loved was tulips and zinnias that we have going in there. We harvested walnut wood from my grandfather's forest wooded area. We milled it with my uncle with his sawmill. My dad put a bench together. And so now it is able to be out in the elements, and we can sit on the bench in the memorial garden and watch the sunset because it faces west. And it's a
That's cool.
beautiful space. Yeah.
It's very cool. I'm picturing some of the things I've seen in Minnesota with Katie with the homesteading RD. Let's talk insects and insect
Mm-hmm.
pressure.
Yep.
I've seen her just so swarmed with mosquitoes that you can't even believe it around there with nets all across just to cope with that. And I'm picturing sitting on this beautiful wooden bench with a massive amount of insects all around. Walk me through that. Is that the case? Was that the case, and it's not anymore because of the amount of spraying of corn, rice, or not rice, but corn and soybeans all in your area? Let's talk about insects.
Well, you just brought up a sentence right there on have the bugs changed. We could go on a tangent on that, but I'm going to keep it short yeah, there's no more bugs sometimes because of the way things have been ran. So nature's best insect repellent for mosquitoes in Minnesota is the wind, by the way. The wind keeps them away. We definitely have seen a change. Now there's all sorts of things you can do, like bring in dragonflies and bat houses, and you do the natural balance of things. But yes, the mosquitoes I see squash vine borers a lot now, all of a sudden in the last couple of years, which I'm going to try to trick them with a couple of things. I see Japanese beetles from the field. They come in and find me. I just handpick those. There's all the conversations about integrated pest management on the least destructive way to deal with the pest. There's the conversation of just having an ecological garden. There's the 4 steps in the plant health pyramid. It's all about the soil health. We're trying to find and establish that balance on some of these garden spaces that I just now have put in the last 3 years.
Well, now you got to go into some of these things. You just opened up all the worms. They're all there. Let's start with changes that you've seen just in the last 8 years with pests.
Yeah. Well, first of all, there's that conversation on when you drive out in the country, how many bugs are on the front end of your car. That's diminished a lot. Going into life cycles of bugs, the timing of things is a different when they hatch or have the reproduction cycle because of our weather. So that kind of changes your approach to it, however that looks like in your garden.
You mentioned all the different layers of integrated pest management, ecological gardening, some of these things. Let's dig into what you're trying and what you're doing on your space in Minnesota.
Yeah, there's that moment of, oh, you put a garden in and nobody finds it for the bugs and the pests. And then the second and third year, all of a sudden, everybody's there having a buffet. So when I saw and established that that's a squash vine borer moth, and now I know how to look for where it's going to put its eggs in my squash plants. I've also looked into having the right cucurbitas, versus Machada versus Peppo versus Maxima. And if I'm going to have the weaker vined squash, this year's experiment is doing a cover crop essentially of mustard in the spring. Now it's a biofumigant, which technically is the chemical compounds that help reduce nematodes in the soil, for example, when you have it grown out to flower and then you chop it and work it into the soil. My hope is that one, I'm feeding the soil by planting a cover crop. Two, I might be confusing the squash vine borer when it's going, that moth, when it's going to lay eggs in one of my vines. I'm going to see if that keeps it away. And I have done where you just let the vine touch soil as it grows and it creates its own roots along the stem. And then you perform surgery. You take out where the eggs are and you burn them or whatever you're going to do, because I don't want to spray BT or anything. Planting different cover crops has been really helpful for me in establishing new garden spaces. This year I'm going to do buckwheat with peppers, which might sound weird, but it's so I have something like a living pathway essentially that I then chop and drop, because I'll put the pepper plant in and then I won't be walking around it for, 30 to 60 days, which is the perfect time to have that buckwheat grow up, flower, and then I can terminate it by chopping and dropping it.
Okay, so you're like in this particular case, the buckwheat is the living pathway companion plant to your peppers. You're going to let it grow up, flower, because it's going to be very aggressive. And how are you planning on terminating that buckwheat? Are you just going to mow it? Are you going to roll it over? What's your plan?
Great question, because, with cover crops and termination, having a plan is key. So normally here in Minnesota, the plan is winter kill it. Because I'm planting it in the summertime and because of the way you plant a garden, it's kind of going to be all over. It's not going to be straight rows, I imagine, because I haven't done this yet. This is new. So crushing, crimping with my feet is an option, but I do have the ability to chop it like a lopper, chop it at the base or rip and then step on it. And then that kind of disrupts the root system to the point where it's not going to keep growing. That's the plan.
Gotcha. So at this point in the journey, with 3,000 square feet of growing space, with multiple different styles of gardening that you've been playing with, how much of the fresh produce that your family would eat in the year are you producing?
Oh, I knew you were going to ask me this, and I don't do percentages. I don't have an answer. I'm getting
A lot.
yeah, it's, I'm getting 5-gallon buckets of cucumbers. Like if you could imagine a 5-gallon bucket filled with cucumbers, which I juice. I'm a juicer. Crates and crates of tomatoes. The percentage I've never mathed out. I don't know how to figure out. The goal this year, honestly, is to actually weigh my harvests so I can keep
Okay.
track of the output. And I also want to journal for variety selection, because we are practicing landrace or adaptation agriculture, where you harvest something that you like. So maybe you're choosing for how quick it came to maturity or the flavor or the size or the color, and I'm seed saving, and then I'm replanting it and introducing new types of varieties to it. Like we did this with watermelon. We're doing it with squash kind of in a way, and pumpkins and stuff. So just yeah.
Okay. I want to loop back to this question may seem like I'm coming from left field. You mentioned it earlier, and you said seeds have memory,
Mm-hmm.
which immediately triggered for me as girl dad, it triggered Else Olaf in the movie Frozen talking about water has memory and all that stuff.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
so I immediately thought of that, and I'm like, okay, you said the fingerprints of the gardener, that the seed remembers that. Let's talk a little bit about all that you may have seen or read or heard in regards to the memory of a seed.
Oh, so first it's, Joseph Lofthouse I've listened to, and then Bevan Cohen. He speaks very passionately about the story of a seed. So what I was referencing when it remembers the gardener's hand is how much care did you put forth in growing that plant? Were you constantly making sure it had water, or did you stress it out a little? Were you constantly providing some kind of food, whether it was like a fermented plant juice or a granular fertilizer or a liquid nitrogen thing? Did you leave it to see if it survives, or did you baby it? That's what I meant by the gardener's hand. The seeds that tell a story of your land is super important because it remembers how cold or windy or your soil life, the nutrition of it, it remembers that and adjusts to it. There's that relationship where a plant grows, the roots in the ground, and there's rhizophagy where it communicates with the microorganisms in the soil around it. And they go, okay, well, I need a little bit more of this, I need a little bit of that. And then if you let that plant form a mature seed and you save it, it's documented all of that information. So then when you plant it the next year, it's now getting acclimated to your little microclimate. And if you think about it, our ancestors carried seeds in their pockets during battle, during huge relocation. Like, what's your excuse? Everyone should be saving seeds of some sort and learning how to do it.
That was awesome. Okay, so our ancestors saved seeds, and seeds were traded, and seeds were moved, and seeds were almost a form of currency, of which they still are. All of grain is the great currency of the world. Most people don't think of that, but grain is the great currency of the world, and it is the reason that all of conventional agriculture is centered around grain crops, because they can store for a tremendous amount of length of time. And it's the currency of food, it's the currency of now fuel, it's the currency of everything. And so back to the history of the ancients, and what you described of people carrying seed even off to battle, um, what was the purpose for that? Was that in case something happened, they would just plant food and start growing? Like, walk me through some of the reasonings of maybe some of this. I'm not necessarily a historian. I'm just fascinated by that statement.
Yeah, the whole history thing of, well, you have to eat to live. Now, if we go way back, we didn't grow gardens. We didn't plant the seeds. Nature did. We foraged everything. It was just there. And we figured out, oh, we should eat this. We shouldn't eat that. Then we started going, oh, I recognize that this is a seed and we're going to plant it. And we started messing with genetics in a good way, maybe a bad way. You can argue that in the comment section on how we develop things that then produce more abundance for us. We have more people on the planet Earth, and we have this responsibility to feed ourselves. And some people take that seriously on independent level, or feeding local level, or having the food supply chain situation. So if you're thinking about your ancestors, because all of you were growers at one time, it is in your DNA to grow food. You know how to do it inside, okay? And if you don't believe that, email me and we'll talk about it. But the whole carrying seeds things, it was for survival, for food. It was sewn inside the pockets, so if they got mugged on the trail, they didn't find them. It was maybe their
What culture groups was this?
Well, in my area, I have Ojibwe and Dakota and Lakota for sure that were here. Now, if you Googled me right now on what tribal ancestors sewed the seeds in their pockets, I don't remember who it was specifically. I just know who walked the land here was what I mentioned.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
I'm tracking with you. I didn't know if we were talking Middle East, Asia. Like, I was just curious
Oh.
as to if we're talking like North
hmm
American people groups. Um, what
it goes
point in
back to the
history?
Middle East. It
Are
does
we
go back
talking
to the
Civil
Middle
War
East.
Americans?
Right.
Like,
Yeah. I am talking North America. Thank you for
okay,
clarifying
okay.
that. If you were to like picture where you're at, North America is what I was speaking about, but it did start in the Middle East. Yeah.
So we're talking primarily North American tribal people sowing seeds into their pockets as they go to hide and protect them as a value or a currency, um, in what we've been talking about. How big of an importance is that uh, in today's 21st century world? Because I don't know of anybody who carries around seed. I know gardeners that have their seed banks, and I know there's seed exchanges, and and I know that there's a lot of hype in regards to genetic modification and all this stuff, and seeds are in, um, I will say, excess in many ways currently.
Yeah.
But the genetics that have been grown to excess are now being shipped across the entirety of the country. And the genetic fingerprints, if you will, of the gardener, the climate, the location is probably in a downward trajectory in the last, shall we say, 70 years. Is that to our detriment?
This is such a good conversation, and I wish I brought like a list of the dying species. It's the same with the pest, dying species of varieties of seeds because people aren't seed saving them and then they get forgotten. Our extreme weather conversation relates to this too because you could be putting all of your seeds you saved, you planted them all out. Something takes out your whole crop, whether it's weather, pest, or other human related, and now you don't have your seed bank anymore. So just keeping am I carrying seeds around in my van? I am, but that's because I garden away from home. So that's kind of unrelated. But you know,
Love it. Love it.
the saving seed thing, it's one of those things that we could talk about forever. Survival in general is up to your own independence. And and we're not going to get into preparedness, but gardening is really up there. We don't know if we're not going to be able to buy a seed for XYZ reasons. So having access to them on your own, in your own way, is super important. Besides what I spoke about earlier about it actually is grown for your area versus one that was grown from a seed farmer in the South when I'm up here in the North and I have a completely different access to the sun, the sky, and the stars over here. So please learn how to save seeds, everyone. It's so important right now, especially.
I think back to some of the most popular varieties of tomato: Arkansas Traveler, Mortgage Lifter,
Mortgage lifter. Yeah.
right? So the story behind those seeds it was the literal seed of, like, the Mortgage Lifter was the seed of a farmer that was trying to figure out a way for him to pay his mortgage, coming out of the Great Depression. And that's the title of the seed, um, that he was able to save back because it kept performing and performing and performing in his area. Same thing with Arkansas Traveler. It was the seed that translated out and kept performing in Arkansas very, very well, that began to travel to other locations and continue to perform. And so, we see these seeds that have been an icon and a building block of, uh, small scale local economies in many, many ways. Um, and it's a powerful reminder that some of these seeds actually made major differences in the life of the grower, um, because of the collection of those seeds and the yields that it was producing and the way that it um, performed. Right now, we're seeing an issue in seed saving for multiple layers. A lot of people who try to save seed, the seed that they're saving maybe it's not stored properly and it doesn't perform. Maybe because of error, maybe because of pest. A lot of seeds get destroyed in storage through insects, through rodents, through improper storage. Um, what are some of the things that you're doing to try to fight against, or obviously you're educating people, you're talking to people about
Yeah.
seed storage. What are you doing in your garden, and what should gardeners takeaway be from this, um, for seed storage and collection?
Yeah, the collection piece is understanding when that plant's seed is fully mature and dry, because nature handles it very well in that sense, and watching your weather on, okay, I know that this marigold or zinnia seed, just to talk about flowers, because usually that's how you get into this, is seed saving flower seeds. This is dry. This is going to be ready for me to take inside, but I know there's a rain coming. So I need to get out there and get those seeds and bring them in. What we do is we lay them out flat and we let them air dry. I know with me, I've brought in dried beans and laid them out and put them in a dehydrator at a really low temp for like 10 minutes just to make sure they are dry, because that is my protein gold, right, in the winter. And then to make sure that if there's any eggs in it, that they've been exterminated in that way. So once you know you've laid out your seeds, this is like winter Minnesota boringness, is packaging up and messing around with taking different parts of the flower or the plant off of the seed, putting the seed in your form of a container. So what I'm doing is a 2x3 zip top baggie with an Avery label on it, so I know what it is. My mother kept things in the freezer. Now, there's all kinds of the correct humidity, lighting, dryness, all that stuff. So when I had a wet basement, I couldn't keep seeds down there, for example. It was a closet in my bedroom. It was an interior closet because the exterior closet gets super cold. And I just was nervous that my seed was going to get wrecked. Keeping it in a dark place. I'm using a clear bag, so I need it in a dark place. It's very easy to go online and look up seed saving basics. I think Johnny's provides charts on how to do this and how to flow. There's, of course, Shawnee Grows on YouTube. You can go over there and learn a little bit, but it's one of those things where you just start and then you watch it. And once you've planted a seed you've saved, you're not going back. Like, it's really simple after that. You just start going, okay, how do I save seed from this plant and this plant? Then we get into biennials and you got to wait a whole nother year to have that thing go to flower and make a seed. It's one of those things that you take baby steps, you make sure you can successfully get it going, and then you just run from there.
I love it. I've often heard of people getting into bees and beekeeping that you don't start with one hive, you start with two. Just in case, a hive swarms on you and leaves, or a hive dies. That way you're still left with a hive. What would be a challenge for people that are going to maybe save seed for the first time this year? What's a good number to start with? Is it 2? Is it 5? Is it 10? Is it
How many
1?
seeds to save?
Not seeds
Oh,
individually, but maybe varieties.
oh, well, you got to start with one, and then, two is one if you want to get into that. So, varieties, I say three. Like, that's something that transfers over in just being a mom and buying groceries, like buying three of things and everything. So having three different varieties, label everything, please, because you're not going to remember, or take a picture, a video of you talking about it, because you're going to go back in the winter and go, wow, all these brassica seeds look alike. Like, if we're saving that, for example, you're not going to remember what it is. So save three varieties, label them appropriately, plant everybody out and see what happens.
I love it. That's great advice. So we've said it a couple times through the episode. Where do people find you if they want to learn more?
Yeah, I am at Shawnee Grows over on YouTube. That's the way to find me. I do educational live stream conversations. I am not an expert. I just like research and digging into things and talking to people. And I also do monthly garden tours. You can see the actual gardens I grow in the videos tab. And I always talk about turning gardens into pantries.
I love it so much. Thank you so much, Shawnee, for what you do, for having the gardening bug, and not the pest bug, but the bug where you continue to grow and you keep on growing year after year, increasing your knowledge and sharing that with the world. Thank you so much for what you're doing. Everybody go check out Shawnee Grows on YouTube. And if you didn't know, this podcast, the How I Grow This podcast, is brought to you by Seed Time. Seed Time is a digital garden planner that really helps you stay on track in the garden and stay focused and be able to organize all the multiple different layers, no matter where you're at. Gardening can be a lot, as this conversation has kind of lent itself to, a lot to learn, but it is such a worthwhile journey as you jump into your gardening program. And you can get started absolutely free with Seed Time. And obviously, there are many ways that you can upgrade your account to access more and more features. Even get free seeds for life on some of the offers that have been put out there. Make sure you check it out. And anybody interested or that pays for an upgraded version of the software, they actually do get 20% off of seeds in the store. Make sure you utilize that and jump in. And then, guess what? Don't just keep buying seeds. Save some of those back. All the seeds in the store are... most of them are open pollinated and heirloom, and many of them are even certified organic as well. So make sure you check out Seed Time if you haven't. And thank you so much for listening to the show all the way to the end. We are so grateful for you. Make sure you hit a like or subscribe on whatever platform you're listening to. Thanks, Shawnee, again. And we look forward to seeing you guys out in the garden.